Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gaming Mix podcast. My name is Jordan, as always, and to my left, as always, is Jeff. We are from analogstickgaming.com, and we're here again. I think this is our fifth episode now, so we're getting a little bit more regular with things. After I had some crazy illnesses, and we've been busy, and schedules are hard to keep. Uh, and you'll notice that because this week's episode will be going out a bit later than planned. I know that last week I said that I was aiming for Tuesdays from now on, um, but we didn't record on our usual day last week, and therefore we're a little bit late this week. But what's going to happen is you're going to get this episode now later in the week, and then early next week. Currently, the plan is to have an Alan Wake 2 spoilercast with our friend Luke from the Eat Sleep Game YouTube channel. So, yeah. How are you, Jeff?
Not too bad. A little tired, but that'll go away shortly.
Well, it is early in the morning for you, so I can appreciate you being tired there. And you've also been playing a lot of games recently, but obviously we'll talk about that later on. We do, however, as we like to say here, we want to get in the mix of things, and we have some news to talk about and a few other things. We also have a main topic because if you haven't seen, there's been craziness going on in games media recently. So we're going to get into that as well. But Jeff, why don't you start by taking us through some of the news this past week?
Yeah, just a couple little stories, basically to kind of start us off. If you remember Hyenas, this was the game that Sega had Creative Assembly working on. They're generally known for like kind of like offline real-time strategy games. And so, anyways, according to VGC, Sega has said that Creative Assembly will return to genres it knows best after Hyena's cancellation. The Japanese publisher announced in September that it was canceling the multiplayer shooter and some unannounced titles under development in Europe following at least 6 years of development on the project. Developer Creative Assembly has suggested that the game was canceled due to ambitious plans and high competition in the multiplayer shooter space, which is exactly what that is. Like releasing another kind of like hero shooter or whatever the case is, like that's a death sentence for like new IPs. Um, However, during financial results briefing presentation held this month, Sega's Sammy Holdings president and group CEO Haruki Satomi said that the developer was working on a genre it didn't know well enough, resulting in the game's cancellation and a number of redundancies. Each studio has its strengths and weaknesses, but the favorable winds of early COVID-19 period, coupled with the strong performance of each title, led us to adopt a strategy of accelerating more, even in areas where those studios have not yet tried for further growth. However, some studios did well and some did not. And so we have decided to focus again on the strengths of each of those studios. To put it simply, Creative Assembly was good at offline games in the RTS genre, but they took on the challenge of developing Hyenas, an online game in the FPS genre. However, although the game itself was good, we decided to cancel the development of Hyenas because we did not think it would reach a quality that would satisfy our users, and we considered whether we could really operate this as a competitive online game for a long period of time. How do you not decide that during the development, like the pre-production stage?
Yeah, you
Like
should
have
be.
you have to go into something like that.
Yeah, and also the other thing is when you're when you're allowing a development studio to take a risk and try something new, you have to be, I think, to have any success with it, you have to actually fully be in on that risk, and you have to acknowledge that it's a risk and allow them to take it, right? Allow them to do whatever they think is right, even if it's a genre they don't know that well, because ultimately the interesting things that come into genres usually come from teams that haven't been in the genre before, because they're not held back by tropes. And you know, I'm not saying it would have been an amazing game. I don't ever expect any team to make an amazing game in a genre they haven't really touched before. But you know, it's just like this game wasn't 3 months into development. Do you know what I mean? And it's a little bit disheartening when you sort of see projects like this, and then it's just like, oh no, we're not really happy with where it's at. We're just gonna give up. It's like, you know, it is disheartening. And as someone who's, you know, seen it quite regularly, even sort of behind closed doors, there's a lot of, you know, I've spoken before about how games sort of start production and get cancelled before you even know they exist. Um, and there's lots of companies that do this on a regular basis, and it's just like, I don't know. I'm all for studios, you know, sticking to what they know best if that's what they want to do. But if Creative Assembly wanted to make this game and they wanted to try something different, in a weird way, I get it, it's a business, but when you're as close to the end as they were, let them see it through to the end.
And it was Sega's biggest budget game ever. Like, that's a lot of money to sink in when you consider like what Sega has kind of done before.
Yeah, because
Like it
Sega
also
have
had
spent a lot of money, let's be clear. Like they don't make cheap games. So for this to be their biggest budget one, yeah.
yeah, they even had Neil Blomkamp reportedly provided the story direction for the game. But what kind of like sunk it as well too is like apparently does my mic keep cutting out at all? It keeps wanting to
It
reset.
looks okay to me, but if you're having issues on
Okay.
your end.
It keeps wanting to reassign my headset. My Xbox is going off. This is alerting that it's resyncing it, but no, reports suggest that the staff at Creative Assembly were unhappy with its development, with some sources claiming that a lack of direction, disruptive engine change, and overly cautious design contributed to its downfall. So it it probably had, you know, I wonder if it changed from like Unreal Engine 4 to like Unreal Engine 5. I wonder. But yeah, like you know, some studios have definitely made good on swapping genres. I
Yeah.
mean, Gorilla is one that's notorious
They are
for
they're
swapping to a
they're the
different type
most
of game.
noticeable, like they're the most notable example of it, aren't they? Where,
Yeah.
you know,
But even
that swap from
Hi-Fi Rush, the
Killzone.
developer there.
Yeah, that's true, but that swap from Killzone to Horizon, I think the reason it's so noticeable and kind of even like talked about today is that, you know, Gorilla made very good first person shooter games, and then to do something
Mhm.
completely different, and admittedly, I think in hindsight most people would say they didn't nail it the first time. Like the first Horizon game had quite a few issues in there, but for your first attempt at a brand new genre that you'd never done before, that was one of the best that we'd seen, really. Um, you know, it's very very rare, but I think we are seeing it more these days. Like you said, Tango Gameworks going from kind of horror genres and doing horror things to Hi-Fi Rush, which is a rhythm action game, which is a lot more colourful and wonderful. Um, but I like that because to me, that ability for studios wherever they're working to kind of take creative risks, you know, is what makes some of these studios special. Something like, you know, one that we always talk about is Obsidian, right? And the reason we talk about Obsidian, there's a lot of comparisons between Obsidian and Insomniac, because a lot of people feel like Obsidian are going to be Xbox's and Microsoft's version of what Insomniac is for PlayStation. I actually don't think that's fully accurate, because I understand where the comparison comes from, but what makes Obsidian special is they do so many different things. It's just like they had Outer Worlds, they're doing Avowed, which is a different thing again. They made Pentiment. They made what was that other smaller project they did, Jeff? Um,
A smaller project.
um,
Well, they did Grounded.
Grounded. Yes, there you go. And it's like straight away. So their last 4 games, one of which isn't out yet, are okay. 2 of them, the 2 mainline AAA games, if you will, are RPGs of some kind, but they are still within a different setting and a different all these kind of things. And then you've got Grounded, which is like some sort of Minecrafty survival game. And then you've got Pentiment, which is there's nothing. I've never played anything like Pentiment personally, and that's what I mean about allowing studios to take these creative risks, because that's where they come up with interesting stuff. And that's why we see indies all the time making really interesting stuff, because they're not beholden to anybody else and they're allowed to just take risks. And it's a shame when we have a company, like Sega, which has the money. Let's be real. These big companies have the money to take a risk, and it's okay for them to fail sometimes. But the industry has become so... It's become so much of a business. Like, it's always been a business. I appreciate that. But it's become so business focused, and it's become so run by businessmen, that it does feel like in certain places, in certain aspects, the creativity is being lost, and the freedom of the creators is also being lost. I feel like if we go back to the PS2 generation, for example, we were seeing crazy stuff left, right, and center from
Well, yeah, they were
everybody.
throwing anything at the wall to see what would stick. I mean, that's it was kind of the Wild West, like PS1, PS2,
Yeah,
and even to an extent, three, especially like the 360 as well too. Like, yeah, it was the Wild West of like game ideas,
yeah,
because like again, like that, it wasn't until we started getting into like you know Xbox One, PS4 era where a lot of the major publishers were leaving a lot of those like smaller titles behind. Because like, remember when Ubisoft used to publish like random shit? Like they made a video game based off VIP, like Pamela Anderson's Secret Agent
yeah,
TV series.
yeah.
Like Ubisoft used to, they used to publish everything, and now
Well,
it's
well,
like unless it's Assassin's
it's
Creed.
the reason that Ubisoft got the audience they got, right, was because they were so varied and they were so sort of out there that not everything they did make worked and was well received. But I think people
Yeah,
appreciated that they took risks, and that's what I'm kind of talking about. Is that's what's sad about this whole news story, really, is that Creative Assembly were taking a risk doing something they haven't done before, and they got so far along in the process that the creative person in me says, why not just let them finish and take that risk? Because you're losing more. In a way, you're losing more by completely shutting the thing down and gaining nothing back than you are at that point letting them spend the next 6 months finishing it or whatever and then releasing it. It's different if, and we don't know this, but if there was a conversation that they needed another 2 years to develop the game fully and then
yeah,
put it out in whatever, that's different, because 2 years of development especially for a studio like that and for a game like that, costs millions of dollars, right? So it's a lot of money at that point. But I feel like, given that they had got to the point of like beta tests with this game, they weren't that far away. So why not let them finish and try and just see what happened, you know?
Yeah, still kind of weird that they even went into that genre, considering like, even back when they would have started development on it, it still would have been a kind of a crowded space.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we've seen that with a lot of games, haven't we? Not just in this genre, but in other genres as well. For a while, um, until open world games sort of reinvented themselves slightly over the last few years. I think there was a lot of open world fatigue going on because everything at one point felt like it was an open world game, and basically became this checklist style game, and there's nothing wrong with those, and people really do enjoy them, right? But there is something to be
Amazing.
said about having an overcrowded genre, and I understand that open world may not be the best example because open world in itself isn't a genre. It started off as one, but it became something that was more a game mechanic, if you will. Um, so yeah, I it's hard because, what do you do? It's like, do you completely ignore a genre just because it's crowded? I don't want that either. I don't want, if a developer and a publisher feels like they can make something that is interesting within a genre and put their own unique spin on it, I want them to try. But
Yeah.
I
Well, I
I
mean, like,
yeah, go on.
because Ubisoft came out with that one game of theirs that failed considerably. Can't remember the name of it though.
Yeah, I know the one you
But
mean, and
then
I
you also
can't think of the name.
because you also have like games even like Rogue Company that came out that I don't think really set the world on fire. Um, Overwatch hasn't been doing terribly great
Yeah.
um,
What?
in
But do you
regards to
know
like
one thing I
kind of
would
its
say
footing.
though?
Oh, Hyperspace. Hyperspace, that was the name of the one. Hyperscape.
One thing I would say though is that, similar to live service games in general, I think that the one advantage with those kinds of games is that they can always come back and they can always be big later down the line. I look at, one example recently is Halo Infinite. I've seen that Halo Infinite, with the launch of Season 5, has got back up to, the highest player numbers that it's had in, I don't know, however many months. It's like well over a year, and it's like, and these player numbers keep rising every single week, and that's because people are talking about the game and playing it because they've added content that people want to engage with. I saw a similar thing happen years ago with Rainbow Six Siege, where when that game first came out, people liked it, but it didn't really stick around too long. After the first couple of weeks, it sort of fell off of a cliff, and now it's one of the biggest sort of live service games of its type in gaming. Like there are hundreds of thousands of people that play that game every week. It's so I do think gaming has changed a little bit, and that actually makes me think of a bit of news that I saw this week that you don't have on the doc here, but I saw a lot of discussion around Starfield's player numbers dropping. I don't know if you saw this, Jeff.
For a single player game? What? I'll stay up there.
Precisely, and it's like, and a lot of sane people who are able to have a responsible conversation kind of said a single player game's numbers dropping 3 months after launch is actually quite good They normally drop a lot quicker than that.
I was gonna tweet back. I'm like, hey, are we gonna check the number for Order 1886? People still playing that Sony game? Come on, should have
Yeah.
high numbers.
It's just like I get that numbers are important, and to be fair, I actually think it's sort of an industry problem where the industry and it started with Xbox, but it's now everybody, I think. But the industry itself has made player numbers and total player count and all these kind of things almost more important than sales. People seem to judge the success of a game now purely on how many people are playing the game. The problem with
Yeah,
doing that is there are too many variables. It's like, okay, the the peak number of players on a game might only be 50,000 players a day, but that doesn't tell you anything about how many players are playing it each month. That 50,000 a day could add up to millions of players in a month. It's kind of like you have no. And also, what I don't like about it is people will take Steam concurrent player numbers and use that like it's representative of this must be how well the game is doing on every single platform that it's on. And that must
yeah,
be and it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's
yeah.
it's
Like it kind of only works that way when it's like, oh, let's check the player numbers for this game. Oh, there's 15 players playing.
yeah,
Like when it gets like numbers like that, you can kind of gauge that. But yeah, when it's a popular game and there's 50,000 people playing it on Steam at the time that that person's checking.
yeah, precisely.
Mm,
And it's just it I get it because there is there is some sort of correlation between concurrent players and success of a game, but concurrent players doesn't tell the whole story, and I think that that's the problem with a lot of these conversations we have, is that gaming has got to this point where no one set of data tells the whole story about a game anymore. Game sales are not completely representative of how successful a game is anymore, because people game
mm,
share, people get access to games for free, in some cases. It's just like, it's and that's it's kind of what I was saying before about how, with Game Pass, we've seen games like Forza Horizon 5 hit over 20 million players, and yet somehow people still call that game a niche game. And in my head, I
yeah,
often think to myself, like, what is the number that we have to get to then where a niche game isn't a niche game anymore? Because to me, a niche game means that it's for a very specific but normally quite a small audience in comparison to other games.
yeah,
I would say that when you get a game that is being played or has been played by over 20 million people, which is not a number that most games hit, regardless of whether they're on a service or not, I don't understand where the conversation can be, oh yeah, that's still a niche game though. It clearly isn't if 20 million plus people are playing it. Like, it just doesn't work that way. But I think that people seem to have this predefined, like, this is what success is in video games, and if you don't hit these metrics, you're not successful. And that's not the way the
yeah,
industry works. So fun story, and this ruins one game that I have been playing, but I jumped into recently because of the Black Friday sale. I decided to buy the original Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3. And I jumped into those games, and to my surprise, on Modern Warfare 3, at the time I was playing it, there was nearly 100,000 people playing the game. And this is like a game that's over a decade old. It doesn't have a new version. Like, technically it does. There's a brand new Modern Warfare 3 that just came out, But I'm talking about original Xbox 360 Modern Warfare 3. I went on
Yeah.
there and there's 100,000 people playing the multiplayer, and it's like, so is that game more? Where does that game sit in the successful thing? It's like concurrent players on its own means nothing, and I think that it kind of ties into the other story about how I think that even some of these companies maybe take certain metrics too literally as being the only way of deciding if a game is successful or not. We see one of the high profile examples of that with Sony was Days Gone, right? Days Gone actually sold very, very well. Sales didn't seem to be the problem with that with that game. It seemed to be, oh, this didn't review as well as our other games, so now we're not really that interested in it. That essentially seemed to be what happened there. Um, and yet by every other metric, Days Gone was actually a very successful game that probably deserved a sequel. It's and then you have Sega deciding to do whatever they've just done with this Hyenas game after spending God knows how much money on it. It just sort of it makes me sad, because there's too the business has evolved too much for people to just be like, "Oh, this is the only way of success." It doesn't work like that anymore. Like Xbox are more successful than they've ever been. Right? They're a really good example of this right now. They're more successful than they've ever been, and yet they're selling less consoles now than they have previously. What does that tell you about business? Is that there's not one way to success. And that is true of video games. You know, if a, if I put a game, so I saw recently an indie game, Spirity, I think it's called, something like that, and they were saying that they launched the game on Game Pass, and within a few days, 1 million people have played the game, but because of the Game Pass deal, on day one, the game was profitable because they obviously got all money from sales on other platforms and stuff as well. So it's like the game was fully profitable on day one of release. They will deem that as a success regardless of how many people play that game because they're a smaller
Yeah.
company that, you know, money
Mhm.
makes the world go round for them because it allows them to make their next cool thing. Um, so yes, I apologise for this rant, but I just think when we're talking about kind of projects being cancelled when they're nearly finished, and then there's other news of people moaning about a single player game all of a sudden 3 months after launch having less player numbers. I guarantee you in 3 months' time there's less people playing Spider-Man 2. Do you know what I mean? That's how
Oh my
single
god,
player games work.
25% drop off. No.
So
Yeah.
there's that, and it just the industry seems to just I don't know draw like every single person on, and this is a social media thing, we all know this, but every single person seems to be drawn towards a negative conversation all the time. They want to be negative, and they we'll talk about it later because I do want to have a bit of a conversation about it. But the Xbox tax conversation that's been going on this week, I actually have some thoughts on that. But it's just like even that became an entirely negative thing, and it's like there is a way to have this conversation without being fully negative, like you know. But we do have a bit more negative news before we move on, Jeff. And what is that news?
Yeah. So I think we brought it up before as there was like some discussion about it, but it's been kind of confirmed now. Like the publisher confirms Time Splitter Studio faces closure before Christmas. This comes to us from VGC. So VGC reported earlier this month that Free Radical was at threat of being closed just 2 years after it was established as part of huge company-wide cuts at Embracer and its owned publishers. Although Embracer has yet to publicly confirm Free Radical's position, sources told VGC that PlayOn has now acknowledged in a company email that the Nottingham, UK-based company could be closed on December 11th, following the completion of a consultation process. As we move through the consultation process and face the potential closure of Free Radical Design on December 11th, 2023, I want to express my gratitude for your commitment and the remarkable work you've done and still keep doing, wrote PlayOn VP, Worldwide Studios and Talents, Lars Johnson. This is a challenging time for all of us, but especially for you, and our focus is to support you as much as we can during this transition. For the past 6 months, Embracer has been carrying out a restructuring plan, which has already seen some game studios closed and some projects entirely canceled. The company confirmed earlier this month that over 900 employees were let go during its second quarter, ended in September. In the case of Free Radical, PlayOn, the Embracer division which runs the studio, is required by UK employment law to consult employees for a minimum of 30 days before making any redundancies, including exploring ways of avoiding them. There remains a possibility that the studio could remain open should Embracer receive interest from third parties interested in acquiring it. However, since VGC's initial report this month, a large number of Free Radical employees have indicated that they're looking for work. At the time of publishing, over 55 of the studio's 100 staff listed on LinkedIn have changed their profiles to indicate they're seeking new employment. Since VGC's original report, some UK studios, such as nearby Splash Damage, have offered guaranteed interviews for any Free Radical Design employees. It's not yet clear what the closure could mean for the future of Time Splitters, the classic first person shooter series now that Free Radical was attempting to revive. The first iteration of Free Radical Design was formed in 1999 and developed Time Splitters and Second Sight following the disappointment reception of Haze and a cancelled Star Wars Battlefront project. The studio went bankrupt in 2008.
Okay, so first of all, while I talk about this, I would like you, Jeff, to find a piece of Unity and Weta news that I want to add to the show. But as for this news here, right? Studio closures suck. I've said it in the past that I think Embracer have taken the completely wrong direction over this financial issues they find themselves in. Um, it's just like, again, why could they have not put this studio up for sale? Or why could they have not even sort of been like, they could have found a publishing partner for this game? You know, it could have been, they could have gone to, I guarantee you now, they could have gone to Microsoft and said, how about we figure out some sort of deal for this game and we'll have it Game Pass day one?
Yeah.
There's a way that they could have kept this game being developed and kept these people in their work. I I really am starting to get fed up with the kind of big business element of gaming, because most of the time, and I mean, look, Embracer is a unique situation in the sense of, I believe at one point they owned over 100 studios and over 300 IP or something like that. And I think they boasted about working on like over 200 games at one time. And we've said it before, a lot of Embracer studios actually make decent stuff when they've put it out. They've done quite well. But when you own that many studios, which is more than anybody else in the world, I believe, you're gonna run into problems. Because as soon as one financial thing goes wrong, it has this domino effect for the entire company. And that's why I don't know about you, Jeff, but that's why I always laugh when people talk about like Microsoft buying up studios and stuff. And it's like, Yeah, but Microsoft are about to own 30 something studios. That's not over 100 studios like Embracer. It's a completely different situation. And it's just,
Mhm.
you know, stuff like this makes me sad because it feels like the people who are in charge at Embracer were putting a bet on having this big deal with the Saudis in place to finance a lot of stuff, and then that's fallen through, and now they have no idea what to do because they're spending more money than they actually have available to them. But instead of putting people out of work and closing things down, surely the first most reasonable thing to do would be, let's look and see if we can sell these studios. Or let's look and see if we can sell a few of the 300 plus IP that we own to make some money to keep these projects going. Like, we
Yeah.
said it before, they own Lord of the Rings, and I get that Lord of the Rings isn't something you're necessarily going to want to sell, but I guarantee
Mhm.
you they could have also licensed that out for a lot of money, and they could have licensed that out in a lot of different ways to make even more money. So it's kind of like, I get it, business is business. And from a business perspective, business is always going to do this kind of thing. The problem is, we're talking about like one of the biggest industries in the world. Gaming makes a hell of a lot of money every single year. Embracer, I'm sure, make a lot of money every year. They don't need to close these studios down and get rid of these people. There's no actual reason for it. And it really, really frustrates me, honestly. I don't know what else to say on this Embracer situation that we haven't already said. I saw your tweet, Jeff, asking Phil Spencer to come to the rescue here.
Good. Right, Phil.
But, you know, if Phil Spencer does listen to this podcast, which he may well do, um, you know, why not? Like, look, I get that people are against consolidation, and this is actually, Embracer is a bad example of consolidation, but also in this
Yeah.
situation, the right kind of consolidation might save one of these companies, and it might save hundreds of jobs, and it might save a project. You know, and that can be anyone. That could be that could be Microsoft come in and say, right, I still believe, and I've said this to you before, Jeff, I think Crystal Dynamics will be a Microsoft studio within a few years. I think
Mhm.
that's a pretty safe bet. I wouldn't be surprised if Sony pick up a couple of these studios as well. Um, and I think that, you know, embrace my concern about Embracer right now is that they're heading the way that THQ was heading, where we're kind of, like back in the day, THQ obviously went out of business, right? And part of that
Yeah.
going out of business was, we're making loads and loads of games, and we're making more games than we can really afford to make, to the point where as soon as one of them doesn't do very well, it actually puts our business in danger. Embracer is kind of doing the same thing, but it's on a much larger scale. And because they've had this massive deal fall through, you know, they're now in a situation where it's like, what is this, the fourth studio that they're going to close or something in like the same amount of months? You know, it's nuts. And like, you know, I just don't want to see more people losing their jobs, but also I don't want to see people losing like the ability to work on these projects that they probably want to work on. You know, I saw,
Investing years of their time.
yeah, and I saw like one of the guys, we were talking about Days Gone earlier, but one of the developers who worked on Days Gone just a year and a half ago joined Crystal Dynamics, and it's like, you know, it's he clearly joined them because he wants to work on whatever they're working on. But is he going to be in a situation in 6 months' time that it's like, sorry, you're going to be losing your job. We're going to be closing Crystal soon. You know, it's nobody knows, and that's the problem right now. Is I really feel for all these people that work for these Embracer-owned studios because they must all be sitting there every day and in the back of their minds thinking like, is it going to be our studio next? Is it going to be our jobs next? They have no idea.
Oh yeah.
And that is a horrible situation to work in any job in, but in a creative job especially, because how can you be creative when you're fearing for your livelihood? Like, something needs to come in and stabilize this Embracer situation, whether that be someone giving them a big deal to kind of make up for the money they lost with the Saudi deal falling through.
Yeah. You'd almost think Microsoft would be like, "Hey, you missed out on a deal for like 2 billion or whatever." It's like, well, here's 2 billion, and every single title you release for the next like 10 years will be a Game Pass day one game.
Yeah,
Because they're
precisely.
spending like 200-300 million or something on like some major Game Pass
Precisely.
games.
So there are companies out there that would be willing to give them money for things, and that's what upsets me about this situation is it's basically greed. It's basically we have this IP library that we don't really want to sell because the IP is what our worth is, and we have these studios that it might be more cost effective for us to shut down because yeah, we could enter a sell process, but that might take 6 months and we then have to, you know, continue to pay wages for 6 months. I get it from a business perspective, but man, these like at some point it's if it goes much further, it's going to get to a situation where the gaming public is going to turn on Embracer, I think, because this is starting to become a little bit ridiculous. I don't know, Jeff, do you have
Mm.
anything to add on it?
No, I think like yeah, like Embracer. I think they had the right idea at the start was to like give these teams like the freedom to work on IPs that they own and especially the right people like Free Radical working on Time Splitters is better than like another studio working on it. But I think when you're hedging all your bets on a deal that is, you know, not a lock, it's tough when you have to then shutter like a large working force of your studios or even like shutter the studio entirely. It just sucks. There's a lot of people that are really looking forward to Time Slitters. That game holds like a special place in a lot of people's heart. So to have that kind of come back from the right people, like that's awesome. But yeah, it kind of sucks what Embracer is doing. Um, and
Did you find that piece of news that I was talking about?
yeah, so Unity, so this was yesterday here. This is
So
according
just
to
so people know
GameSpot.
as well, this is a gaming related piece of news, but that's what we do here on Gaming Mix. As we mentioned in the very first episode, we will talk about things from other entertainment mediums when they relate to gaming, and I saw this morning and it just, I don't know, this one broke my heart in many ways.
Yeah, because like yeah, Unity owns Weta Digital. So Unity is to lay off 265 employees at Weta Digital as part of a company reset. So only 2 years after acquiring part of Weta's VFX business, Unity is stepping back to focus on its core business. So Unity has announced a round of layoffs and the closure of Weta Digital after it has decided to end its agreement with Peter Jackson's Weta FX. The layoffs will impact 265 employees, a total of 3.8% of its workforce. Back in December 2021, Unity acquired a part of Peter Jackson's Weta Digital, including Weta Digital tools, pipeline technology, and engineering talent, a deal worth $1.625 billion. The remainder of Weta Digital remains under Jackson's ownership and rebranded to Weta.fx, with the company maintaining an agreement to use Weta Digital's tools and services. Now Unity says it has terminated the professional services part of this agreement, which will result in the layoffs of 265 employees involved in the agreement. WetaFX issued a statement to FX Guide saying that it would be looking to rehire as much of the Weta Digital team as possible. Unity will retain ownership of the tools it acquired, and they will remain readily available for WetaFX to use. Unity believes the Weta Digital team are remarkable, but Unity needs to become leaner as it's focused on its expertise of its core business. The statement says, explaining why this decision was made. It also believes it made more sense for WetaFX to own full end-to-end production activities directly. Unity will be focusing its expertise on people on other matters, and WetaFX will be getting support for its use of the Weta tools directly from its own crew, a shorter path which makes sense for both companies. So the move has been called a company reset, and the company will encourage employees to work from home more often, removing mandatory in-office days for employees and reducing full in office services to just 3 days a week. So this comes up obviously after
Yeah.
all the news that Unity had, which it doesn't necessarily make them look really any good right now.
No.
Like Unity's like
And
every company seems to have like branched out to these bigger and bigger things,
yeah.
and now going back to basics. And
And
I'm like,
I have a massive problem with this because there was a quote in what you just read in there where they talk about how Unity somehow have decided that, oh, actually it would be better for WetaFX to own all this stuff. They owned it in the first place, so why did you buy it from them? It's just like, what? That doesn't even make sense.
yeah,
it, I get it. They clearly there's been some really weird stuff going on at
mm,
Unity and they've made some very bad decisions and they need to reset, but this just felt like the cherry on top of a bad cake. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like another thing on the pile of bad Unity related news recently, and I don't know, man. It just, this one just seems weird to me because it's kind of like, well, if you're basically buying, you bought this company because you want to own their tools. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. But then you're admitting that it makes more sense for the company that use the tools to have that stuff directly in their pipeline anyway. So what was the point in the first place? Other than trying to branch out into something that you have no real expertise in whatsoever. It's just like, stick to what
yeah,
you know, and that goes against what we were saying earlier about taking risks and stuff in development. But Unity isn't a developer. Do you know what I mean? They're not, and it's not like they're out here combining Weta's tools with their game engine, as far as I'm aware. So, what 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 do we expect? Like, what are they? What are they? I don't really understand what's going on at Unity recently, personally. Uh, and I know that obviously, I forget the guy's name, but that guy that used to be at EA, Riccatello, was it? I believe.
Don Riccitiello.
Yeah, and it's just like he's gone now, I believe. And so clearly they've had a leadership change, which this leadership change wants to see them go back to focusing on gaming and kind of the business they know the best. I think clearly this leadership is trying to sort of refocus the company and in doing so gain back the trust of the developers and the community at large. But again, doing it like this, it's just kind of like, do you really want your name attached to another negative thing so quickly
Mm.
after such a negative thing for the company? Like, their last decision potentially could have, like, I'm not exaggerating when I say their last decision could have potentially put their company out of business because of silly things that they wanted to do. You know, they managed to save that, but it did damage, and this has just done more damage to them. I I really hope they can kind of, just sort themselves out and stop making these terrible decisions. Basically,
Hmm.
that's all I really have to say on it. There is one more piece of news before we move to our main topic. I saw recently that Xbox have confirmed they will be at the Game Awards. I don't know if you saw this, Jeff, but
Yeah, I saw the picture tweet.
they've actually been sending emails out to people to basically say, tune in, we're going to have some news there. But they've also made it sound like it's not just news about video games. And I think that's interesting because the last time someone made the point that the last time they told people ahead of time to watch the Game Awards was when they
Hmm.
revealed the console there and they revealed
Series
Hellblade 2.
XL.
It
Let's do it.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, are they going to reveal a hardware revision at the Game Awards? I wouldn't be
They'll probably
surprised.
reveal that cylinder console with the new controller with the haptic feedback and all that kind of stuff. But I'm pretty sure that they'll announce something. I think more than games, just because of like again telling people specifically to watch it.
Yeah, the fact that they're telling people specifically to watch it, they've made it sound like it's big news, but surprisingly, they're also not hyping it up on social media. Like, I haven't yet seen, normally a lot of Xbox's marketing is done through good social media interaction, right? From Aaron Greenberg and Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond, they do really good stuff on social media, but none of them have spoken about it yet. And that makes
I
me.
wonder if some of it's going to be another wave of Xbox 360 backwards compatibility.
That would be
Because Sarah
nice.
Bond, I think this morning tweeted out the Xbox 360 logo.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That would be I mean, it would be nice if they did some stuff with the Activision back catalog. That would be nice. There's a
Yeah.
few there's a few games in there that, you know, people would love to see. Um
All the Transformers games backwards compatible would be great.
yeah, that would be cool. I I feel like, and I said it before, but I do think I have a funny feeling that we're going to see Hellblade, and I think we'll get a Hellblade release date.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Um I think the Hellblade release date might even be sooner than we think it is. Um a lot of people seem to think it's going to be late next year. I actually think it might be early next year. I think it might be like a between March and May kind of game, you know. I but I've heard a few people sort of hoping that they're going to reveal Gear 6, and it's like they could do. I could see that. But I guess it depends how big they want to go, because I'm still under the impression that they're going to have a developer direct early next year. And it's like, are you not going to want to save some stuff for that? I think the problem
Yeah, but you got to
is,
think the audience that you get from
yeah.
the video game awards
Do you know the
is
one I
way
would
different
do
than
you
you
know
get.
the one I would show at the Game Awards? Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
because that is like well-known IP from a team that makes really good games that people love. Like, that's a shoe in for, unless, like, I
And you
think
have Harrison Ford show up on stage.
I think this is the thing as well. The reason people are getting a little bit carried away with this thing is because the email they sent out and the statement that is on there made it sound like they will be showing more than one thing. And but obviously people have no idea what that is. I would actually laugh if it was a pro console, because obviously they made the point in the past that they're not going to do a pro console, or we've at least seen some documents that suggested they didn't originally plan to do a pro console.
Yeah.
But that would be quite interesting. I think more likely than not, though, it's probably going to be the thing you said, where they'll reveal the cylinder all digital Series X, sorry, with the new controller.
But
I
it'll be XI Ellender, like cylinder, but with an X. That's what it's going to be. I'm calling it now, Greg.
I could see it. I could see it being that. I really could see it being the Kojima thing, just because I think that would be a big moment for them, of like reveal the Xbox Kojima thing on the place that Kojima gets his biggest audience. Um, but we'll have to wait and see. I think that's actually one of the best things about Xbox right now is they have so many things that it could be, that's what makes it exciting, because you don't know which one it's going to be. They could show any of the 4 games from next year, or they could actually show something that's a bit further off. Imagine they go wild and they show Fable, and then they say Fable's coming next year, which they didn't confirm in their show, but imagine if Fable was coming next year. It's like there's a lot of things they could do. There was part of me, though, of like, what if it was something really stupid, like, oh, we're going to announce the new head of Activision, and they're only doing it there because it's someone we already know. Do you know what I mean?
Layton or Sean Layton.
Oh, God. Jim Ryan. Oh,
Probably.
I mean, Jim's been out here making strategic partnerships recently. Did you see that, Jeff? They made a strategic
Oh,
partnership
I haven't.
with a
I haven't.
South Korean developer, apparently to help them reach more than the console audience, and people were kicking off about that, which I found quite funny. But I said to someone earlier in the week that if you look at PlayStation's strategy, I don't think their strategy is actually very different to what Xbox's strategy is. It's just that they're a few steps behind because they started on the strategy later. But ultimately, their strategy is to get their stuff as many places as possible, right? That's kind of.
Almost like as if they want to play anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they got that portal now, but they don't let people play anywhere on it. so, so who knows? But we do have a main topic this week, and again, it's somewhat of a sad one, really, but it's also just a strange one. Because, look, we are a smaller media outlet that is fully run just by us, and, we don't really have to worry about anybody else. But there are bigger outlets out there that are having some trouble recently, Jeff, isn't there?
Yeah, like yeah, I know obviously we don't profit from the website. We don't have ads or sponsors or anything like that. However, if ads or sponsors are listening to this and you're not some lame casino site trying to get links on my website and emailing me at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's people out there that are working on outlets and stuff for their livelihood, whether that's through like The Escapist or Kotaku or like Washington Times, like the New York Times,
Yeah.
tons of stuff. So we'll start from the most recent here and work our way back. Um, but basically, the cost of games media has been a telling point for quite a while, actually. I mean, we've seen, um, you know, places like Giant Bomb and GameSpot like being moved from different ownerships and stuff, and now they're under fandom. And even when they went to fandom, they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna have no cuts." And then, like a year after being on fandom, Giant Bomb had to let go of two editors. So I mean, like that kind of stuff happens. But the most recent one right now is that ReedPop. These are the people generally behind PAX. They're investigating the sale of Eurogamer, GameIndustry.biz, Rock Paper Shotgun, and more. So the Gamer Network. So ReedPop. So this is from GameDeveloper.com. ReedPop is prepared to sell its entire gamer network business, which includes major game industry productions like GameIndustry.biz, Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, and BG247. Um, GameIndustry.biz broke the news and said that its parent company is investigating a potential sale. Notably, the sale wouldn't include the UK-based events MCM Comic Con or Eurogamer Expo, which is EGX.
Yes.
ReedPop, which runs global video game festival PAX and oversaw the ill-fated attempt to revive E3, purchased Gamer Network in 2018 and described the acquisition as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Under the company's stewardship, however, US Gamer was shut down after all four remaining staffers were laid off in 2020. That same year also brought the departure of Gamer Network founder Rupert Lohman after 2 decades. Repop has stated that its UK-based publications are more likely to thrive under new ownership. Um, so right now, this particular bit of news is not necessarily speculation because there's been some parts that have been confirmed for sure,
Yes.
but this hasn't happened yet. So there could be a variety of different factors that go into whether or not um, these are saved, whether or not it leads to more significant deals with advertisers to kind of keep that stuff going.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I will say about Repop is it doesn't sound like this story is built around a company not understanding its audience, not understanding its creators, not understanding that stuff, but more of like they want them to thrive under new leadership because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that
I
leads
I also wanted to
into
point out for a second before we move on, that they also own part. They own part of Digital Foundry as well, which obviously
yes, yes, that was the other one.
is a
Yeah.
big YouTube channel that everybody loves in a technical sense for video games.
If any of those survive, I would say Digital Foundry because they have a huge audience. I think that I'm pretty sure they've got a Patreon that plays
Yeah.
a good amount of
Yeah,
their bills
and
and stuff.
and that's the thing is they have a unique audience as well because they were the first ones really to do that kind of thing, and I think that to their credit they do it so well that they actually got people who weren't normally interested in that very technical side of video games more interested and more informed about it, and that's a
And if
massive credit
anything,
to their team.
they're a huge part of the console war kind of thing as well too, going like, oh well, this game on Xbox runs at 60 FPS and it runs at 45 frames on PlayStation. Like it's become that talking point too.
Yeah.
So like they're a huge talking point across the entire industry,
Yeah, and
more
I
so
would
than
hate to
I think
see,
any of those outlets.
and hopefully, given that Reed Pop only own part of them, that shouldn't be a massive issue. But I would hate to
Yeah,
see them disappear, as I would with any of these sites. Being British myself,
for sure.
these are sites that I'm very familiar with and and have been for many years. And I
Mhm.
have friends that work at these sites. I have people that I know that have worked for many of these sites actually. So it would be disappointing if this results in job losses and stuff. But it's hard because it sort of feels like maybe Reed Pop is doing the right thing as well, right? Is like they're not just closing these places down, they're looking to sell them because it sounds like potentially they don't necessarily know what is best to do with them for the specific British audience. Um, because we're all a bit weird over here in Britain. We have our specific
And they could
ways of.
shutter. They could shutter. They could shutter Metro. That'd be fine. You know. But all the those outlets and stuff like that, like yeah, like you definitely want to keep them around because like Eurogamer is like I know Eurogamer. Like
Yeah.
I haven't really checked like VG 24/7 or Rock Paper Shotgun. Those are
So
sites that I'm
Rock Paper
terribly familiar with.
Shotgun,
I know the name.
interestingly, Rock Paper Shotgun is actually a really local. Like they're based where they're where they work out of is like an hour away from me. So they're actually the most local site to me. But Eurogamer, I would say, and you would know more about this, Jeff, but from my understanding, Eurogamer is the sort of most wide reaching British site. And then after that, it's probably VGC, which is obviously independently owned. They are actually, interestingly, they did comment on this because they are a partner of ReadPop, but they are
Mhm.
independently owned, so they're not dragged into this situation, luckily. But yeah, I don't want to see any media companies kind of disappear because they all offer unique things, and that's the one great thing about games media in particular, is that I feel like every single website you go to does offer something unique. The way that we do things at Analog Stick Gaming, for example, is completely different to the way that the Outer Haven, who I also write for, they do things completely differently to us. And both of our websites do things completely differently to IGN. Every website has its own unique flavor and kind of finds an audience based on that. And I think that if these British websites were lost, it it would be a huge blow to gaming in general because not to toot our own horn, but the UK is a massive video game audience. It's one of the biggest video game audiences in the world. We're a small little country, but actually, when you look at sales and things like that, we are one of the biggest audiences in the world. And for a lot of people, they will only read the British websites. They don't read IGN and GameSpot and others. They will read Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun. It's just, so I hope that whatever's going on here, I really hope that they can find the right home or the right situation for these sites to give them the best future possible. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. So like again, like Repop, I think is not necessarily like giving them kind of like unrealistic numbers to shoot for or anything like that, which is exactly kind of what happened to the company that has owned The Escapist. So this coming to us from the Economic Times. It says, so last night, which is quite a while ago now, witnessed a dramatic turn of the events as The Escapist, a long-standing gaming website, made the decision to fire several of its team members, including editor-in-chief Nick Calandra. The reason cited were their alleged failure to meet the performance targets set by the parent company, Gamers. Now, Nick was on, um, hold on. It's bringing up an ad here. There we are. Nick was on the Friends Per Second podcast chatting with Scale Up and Lucy James about those kind of unrealistic projections where they're like, oh, we need you to do like this video and it needs to have like 10 million views or something like that. Like it was to the point where it's like, no, you get those views by being like viral and a whole bunch of other things and stuff. So he was given a lot of like unrealistic things to obtain because, like, again, they were purchased by another company and whatnot.
Yeah.
Here, we'll get back on the story here. Um, Following Calandra's termination, various members of the Escapist staff, contributors, and producers took to Twitter to announce their own resignation from the site. Many of them indicated their intention to collaborate directly with Calandra on a new project. Nick Calandra was highly regarded as editor in chief and had evidently cultivated significant loyalty among his team members, as evidenced by the events of the previous night. Nick also commented on France Per Second podcast about how The Escapist was not in a good place when he took it over. And he kind of righted the ship and kind of brought it back to being something that people really, really enjoyed. There is one component of The Escapist that a lot of people know, and we'll get to that here shortly in the story. Nick says, I was let go for not achieving goals that were never properly set out for us, and a lack of understanding of our audience and the teams that built the audience, Calandra wrote on Twitter. This wave of departures and terminations resulted in a complete overhaul of the Escapist video department. Particularly noteworthy was the departure of Yahtzee Croshaw, renowned as the voice behind Zero Punctuation, one of the oldest and most prominent video game critique series pretty much of all time. Crawshaw resigned, but it's important to note that he does not possess the rights to Zero Punctuation brand. It's evident that the brand's continuity may be in jeopardy without him, even if the Escapist retains it. Crawshaw took to Twitter and said, Today, I formally resigned from the Escapist and Gamers. I don't have the rights to Zero Punctuation, but whatever happens, you'll be hearing my voice again soon in a new place. So basically, what happened with the Escapist, and you get with Nick Calandra and Croshaw and a bunch of other people that came on, is they started Second Wind, which has already come out. It's already out there. They're doing like kickstarting funding. They're doing all sorts of like fundraising and patrons and all that kind of stuff. I believe Nick had said that like the main team is not taking any paychecks right now until the start of next year, just to kind of fund everything that they're kind of doing. So Yahtzee is back doing his thing. I
He did
think
an
it's
Alan Wake
called
2 video,
Fully
right?
Ramblematic. Yeah, I think it's called Fully Ramblematic.
Yeah.
Is the new Zero Punctuation. So Second Wind's up. Definitely check them out. Support them if you really want to kind of see that stuff thrive.
I mean, I would
They already
definitely,
have
yeah,
stuff coming out.
I would say that, when anything like this happens, one thing I would say is sometimes it leads to really great things. So
Yeah.
go and check them out, as Jeff said. I would actually recommend. I only watched a few minutes of the Alan Wake 2 video that they put out, but
Yeah, wait until I beat it before I watch it.
yeah. So I only watched a couple of minutes because I didn't want to spoil myself on the game. But I would recommend, like, if you've played the game, go and watch that as well because it seems hilarious. Um, so yeah, I think they're gonna do good stuff, right? Because these people that left the Escapist or got fired for basically hitting goals that were not hitting goals that were completely unreasonable to start with. It sounds like they're clearly very, very good at their jobs and they know what they're doing, right? And who's to say, like, this could be the next kind of funny, or, what was that other one that was started up by the Game Informer guys a while ago? You remember that one? Um, what's that channel called? Ah, Jesus, that's gonna annoy me right now. Um, ah, ah,
I'll get into this the next part of the story here while you try and maybe think about that one.
yes.
Yeah, so like Second Wind again, like they have formed something pretty substantial in regards to continuing on what those teams were doing. So definitely check them out. The other part of it, and this was a little while ago as well too, is that Kotaku, Washington Post, and Vice alum or from form Aftermath. So founders Nathan Grayson, Gita Jackson, Riley McLeod, and Luke Plunkett new independent publication. So they have launched Aftermath. Aftermath is an independent subscription-based site and podcast covering internet culture and video game news. The publication was founded by career journalists Ida Jackson, Riley McLeod, Nathan Grayson, and Luke Plunkett. This news also comes to us from gamesindustry.biz. It intends to focus on breaking news, criticism, and analysis. Aftermath also aims to focus on labor matters across video games, streaming, board games, journalism, which its founders were also affected by. We're inspired by the wave of worker-owned websites such as Hellgate, Defector, Remap Radio, Discourse Blog, and 404 Media, Ida Jackson says. Aftermath not only aims to put control back in the hands of the workers and put the focus back on serving readers, but also hold the volatile games and tech industries to account. So this is like another outlet that people kind of have been let go from, and have decided to kind of funnel that energy into new creative processes. Now, obviously, they have to ensure that their livelihood is looked after. So they're putting up like subscriptions, they're putting like Patreon goals, Kickstarters, all that kind of stuff, basically to be able to fund that stuff. Kind of Funny works the exact same way, where they have
Yeah.
their subathons and all that kind of stuff
Yes.
going.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, it's one of those things where it kind of has to be entirely community funded.
Yeah.
Um, that's
And
just how it
that other
how it
channel
seems
I
to
was
be.
thinking of was Minmax,
Okay.
which
Inmax has been around for a while, so yeah, that wouldn't have been recent or anything.
no, but they were just the other one that came to mind when it's like
Yeah,
people that leave a site that are very, very good at what they do often turn into something fantastic in their own right. So, just keep an eye on all these people because they sound like they know exactly what they're doing. And I don't know any of them personally, but they seem like
yeah.
good people as far as I can tell.
Well, it's like the biggest issue comes from companies purchasing these outlets, sometimes in just droves, and then expecting overnight success from them in a way where it's going to be just endless profit, like from the get-go, like going like, oh, if you have 50 million subscribers, then we need 50 million like hits on every single one of your videos, and that's never the case. That kind of stuff just never happens.
I think the other
But
thing
still,
is it's it's companies that are buying these outlets that don't actually understand the industry, right? And and that makes a huge difference because
especially when it's like newspaper ones like the Washington Post.
yeah,
I mean, US Gamer shuttered down as well too, I think.
yeah, yeah. But it's like so we've got over here in the UK we've got the Guardian, which is now actually quite a like they do quite a well respected bit in. They're a massive paper anyway. They cover everything, but
Yeah.
they have a games section, which over the last sort of 5 years or so has become really well respected. It's not quite like it's not like the Metro, it's actually become really well respected. But they offer a unique outlook on games yet again, and it's like, but because they are a small part of a bigger thing. I think they have less pressure to be like, oh, you must be bringing in this many people to our paper or to our website, otherwise you're failing. That's the luxury of being part of a bigger thing. I think what happens with a lot of these other outlets is they seemingly get picked up by people who see that, oh, there's money and there's engagement in the video game business. Let's buy something and get into it to kind of capitalize on that with our other stuff as well. And they don't really understand the business, so they don't know how to make the most out of it. It's like you were saying. Some people who don't know what they're talking about genuinely think that if you've got 1 million subscribers, unless you're getting 1 million views on every video, that means you're failing. And it doesn't work that way. Like, not every subscriber is going to watch every video. Not every subscriber is going to click on every single article that you write. It just, that's not the way that media works.
But it was even like when Facebook was promising like that they were going to have massive success in video, and I think they lured over like College Humor or whatever, and then all of a sudden the numbers weren't there, and then that just ruined that. So it's like you get a lot of companies that are like trying to bring in all this talent, all these people and stuff like that, and they just don't understand that a lot of stuff takes a while to kind of find its audience, especially when you're like repurposing stuff. So like, it's like Nick had mentioned on a Friends Per Second podcast, is like the goals that were set to him by that those companies and stuff were just completely unrealistic. Saying that you kind of have to take time to kind of build those audiences, and a lot of the outlets that have these massive audiences, it took them years to kinda get through that. Like, I remember when Kinda Funny started, and they had, like, the podcast, and they had a couple little things and stuff, and they only had, like, what, it was only, like, 4 or 5 people or whatever.
Yeah,
Now they got, like, 3 times that, they got a tons of show, they got a whole new studio, which is, like, you know, industry standard, or, like, beyond the industry standard,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
they did that over the course of years and years and years.
yeah. Well, it's like us. Look, I don't want to, but I want to give people an idea of like, there's just different scales to everything. We've just started this podcast. We're getting like 20 views a week at the moment. That's not a lot, but we're getting there, and eventually, one day, we hope to have 1,000 views a week. That would be cool. you know, it's and it's kind of, it feeds into what Jeff is saying, is like, you build an audience over time through consistency, but also through figuring out what your audience wants, because audiences and what they want change as well. And it's like, if you look at Kinda Funny, over the years, their content has actually significantly changed. Even some of the shows that they do that still have the same names and things, the shows are actually different. They've changed the format, they've changed certain things about them. You know, Kinda Funny, the biggest joke with Kinda Funny for a while was they aren't bringing in the Xbox audience because they didn't have an Xbox based show. And then, I believe it was a couple of years ago now, they started up the Xcast, and within like a month, it was one of the biggest Xbox based podcasts that there is. So it those those bigger things only happen fast when a company or an outlet already has a big audience. Like, IGN could start up something next week, and by January, it would probably be quite a big and successful thing, because as more people hear about it, it would grow. But like, things just take time, and I think a lot of people forget that. But I think that isn't unique to just this situation, which is the sad part about it. Not I think the problem is that not enough people who are outside of the gaming industry, whether that be on the media side, the dev side, whatever it might be, I think not enough people who are on the outside of it, and I would actually in many ways include the majority of gamers in that as well. I don't think they have a great understanding of how the industry actually works, and that's not through any fault of their own. I don't expect them to. But when you're coming in and buying a company, surely you want to understand what it is they do and what makes them unique, and then you want to amplify that, right? You want to give them time and set reasonable goals and just amplify them to do the best that they can do like, it's kind of like we were talking about the Reedpop situation earlier, and that one feels very much like, as you said, Jeff, they seem to just want these sites to be able to do the best they can do, and they're not sure that they are the people to help them do that. I actually think
Mm.
that that's quite a good thing, because at least they're recognizing maybe we are not the ones who should be, holding the reins of this site, because maybe we don't know what we're doing with that specific audience. Um, and then yeah, I don't know. And then this escapist situation is something different entirely, because that all seems to stem from unrealistic goals, you know,
Yeah,
about
and then a
engagement
couple
and
of
stuff.
employees like left in protest.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, that's that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen anywhere. It's kind of like, um, we both own this site. Let's say that this site gets to the point where we're really big, and maybe eventually one day we would have to hire other people, right? Probably not, but if we ever did, we would. If there was then a situation where one of us walked away, or one of us got removed for some reason, there would probably be a likelihood that some of the people would come with us, because loyalties are a thing. We're human beings, and what did they think was going to happen when they basically got rid of the guy that was running the entire site effectively,
Yeah,
and
he turned it around too.
turned it into what it is? It's just, it's it's a really strange and, again, quite sad situation of, like, I don't know why these things happen. I I'm glad to see them sort of landing on their feet and finding new things to do so quickly. And I think that that's one. We always talk about the negatives of social media, right? But I think one massive positive of social media is that you can, if you do things right, you can land on your feet very quickly in a industry like games media, because you can find opportunities. Very, like, kind of funny, to their credit, how often have we seen them bring in people that have lost their jobs from another media site or outlet, and it's like, they'll bring them
Yeah,
in for a week, they'll let them be on some of the
the pros.
shows, get their name out there, get what they're going to be doing next out there. And it's like, so people who know me will know that I'm a big wrestling fan. And one of the analogies that I liked the other day from one of the wrestling channels that I watch is that there's not one pile of money that everybody's grabbing at in this age of YouTube and content. There's money enough for everybody. And actually, everyone helping everybody else only helps everyone make more money. So why wouldn't we help each other? You know? And that's why I'm grateful for things like Keith Mitchell at the Outer Haven, editor over there, guy who founded the site. I said thank you to him the other day because he shared our last episode of our podcast. And that was something he didn't have to do, but they have a bigger audience than us, and we're only just starting this thing. They've had their podcast for a very long time now, and go and check out their YouTube channel, The Outer Haven, because they've got 16,000 subs. We're here on 13 subs at the moment, so if you're a new listener, please hit that subscribe button, because I'd like to catch them up one day. That would be nice. But my point is, they have no reason to help us, but them helping us, whether that be through exposure or one of us going on their show or whatever it might be, it doesn't take away anything from them and what they've achieved. And I think that that is the one positive of this kind of age of content and YouTube and social media, is that there are so many different ways to put a unique spin on things and do your own thing, you know. And I imagine that part of these, there will be a part of these people that left The Escapist that are actually really excited about now being able to do completely their own thing and having complete control over it. Because when you're owned by somebody else, ultimately what they say goes, right?
Mhm.
And is is like me and Jeff. We recently, as you would know, we have been updating our score system on the site. We're using some new scores. That was something that I put to Jeff. That was something that I kind of recommended, and it isn't a massive change for our scores, but we've done something that would hopefully give a little bit more detail for those of you that do just sort of scroll to the end of a review and look at the number. We know lots of people do that. I'm sure Jeff knows that, for running this site for years by himself. But that was a conversation we had, and it's between the two of us, and that was for us to decide, because we are now at the point where we are equal partners in this website. If I was an employee of Jeff, I wouldn't be able to do that in the same way. I might be able to make a suggestion, but ultimately I have no decision making power, right? And that's kind of the thing for these people at The Escapist who left and stuff like that. Is like, they would have had no real decision making power over the big, meaningful things, because they would have still had to have run it by. They would have had to have run it by the money people, right? They would have had to, like, if they wanted to do something that was going to cost money, they need the money. It's. But having that freedom of, like, okay, maybe we're relying on sort of community funding now. You can use that community funding in the way that you see fit to make the best content possible for people, and you can kind of adjust more quickly in what you want to make. So I wish nothing but the best for them, and I hope that they are all sort of excited by what they're doing now. And I implore you to go and check out all of these things that they're doing, because they could, you may have never heard of these people before, you may have never read the Escapist, but there's new cool content on the internet for you to go and consume. So go and check it out. That's what I would say. So Jeff, do we have anything else to say on this main topic?
No, I think that's all it is right now. Like until we kind of hear what the future of what Repop's going to do, because right now, again, they're just looking for interested parties. But until it kind of comes like a bigger story, it is just one of those things where it's like, if you can, subscribe to each those websites like their YouTube and consume their content and just kind of show that Repop does have a good thing going for them, and that they do have like good outlets to kind of like you know keep them essentially making money.
And I do want to
Um,
say one thing to people as well, because people who watch YouTube forget this, but even liking a video makes a massive difference. And I think a lot of people don't even realize how much difference it makes. But it's kind of like a liked comment on Twitter, right? The more that a comment is liked, the more likely you are to see it on your feed. And so, even if you just pop by a video to put a like on it, whether that be, it could be a Digital Foundry video, for example. We talked about them earlier. They do amazing stuff for a specific audience. But even if you pop by their videos just to put a like on it, that is you helping them. And we want these places to stay open, so let's try and help as many of them as possible. And I just, like I said earlier, what does it? It's not costing you anything to help somebody, and the way that you, the viewer, can help someone the most is subscribe to their channel, liking their video, maybe leaving a comment if you really like what they're doing or if you have some feedback. We always say here, and I'll say it right now, if you have feedback for us, please leave it in the comments, because we will actually listen to that stuff. We will engage with you on it, and I know Jeff will say the same. Like, we want this show to be what people want it to be. So, just engage. That's all I really ask for, is engage with them. But talking about engaging with things, Jeff, have you been engaging with many video games lately?
Oh God, not even one. No, yeah, I have been playing way too many games right now. Uh, from the list I sent you, Jordan, is there one you want to know about more than the others?
Let me have a quick look and I will tell you. From the list you sent me,
There's there's
uh,
lots. I've been very busy.
there is a lot. Um, so I would like to know, in a most spoiler free fashion as possible, because I'll be playing this game. I would like to know about Like a Dragon Gaiden, please.
Yeah, so the man who erased his name. Um, so originally, excuse me, when this game was first being conceptualized, it was designed around being DLC for Like a Dragon. And because of its simplicity, it had a development of just over half a year. So it had about 6 to 8 months of actual development. You can feel that here. Now, most Yakuza games, they kind of take place in the same map with a lot of the same activities and so on and so forth, whether that's Kamurocho or Satonburi. Like those games kind of exist within a repetitive template. And the things that definitely change are like the stories and the characters and the situations and the fighting styles. Like they kind of reinvent a lot of things over and over again. And I will say, like, the man who erased his name has some moments that are extremely good. Um, the final chapter itself is um, really, really entertaining. Some of that last chapter you have already seen in Like a Dragon because it does connect itself well to that game. Um, you get to see things through Kiryu's perspective, and not to mention the fighting is full real time brawler. It's not a turn based game, so um, I will say though, however, I don't know if this game was the best way to tell that particular story. Like, I almost kind of wish that, like, basically, to go from Yakuza 6, like Kiryu has to like fake his death to protect a bunch of kids at an orphanage. So he makes a deal with the Daidoji, and that it goes from that storyline, that part, which is the storyline of the man who raised his name, to how Kiryu ends up in Hawaii for infinite wealth. You have to bridge that.
Oh, they
This
go.
would have worked
Hold on. They
really
go
good.
that far.
Well, they have to explain how he gets to Hawaii,
Okay. Okay.
and the how he gets to Hawaii part is like, eh, like it is what it is. I will say, like, there's one scene in this game that is just incredibly powerful, and you'll notice it. It's a scene with a tablet, and it is such a absolutely fantastic scene. Like, I don't care who you are, it's going to leave you teary eyed. It is unbelievably well done. That scene is great, but I don't think it results. I don't think it justifies like the game. I think that this story could have been like they could have released a Infinite Wealth demo or something like before the game came out that was just like a bite-sized thing to kind of get you into it. This could have been a Netflix and movie. This could have been something because throughout the 15 hours of however long this game is, there's like an hour of worthwhile story here because so much of this game is just, oh, you need to get there. I need you to do these like 20 things before I can get you to that point. And if they fill it with like Coliseum battles and like all these side quests and like I don't like how the sub stories are selectable missions in a menu. They're not things you organically find in the world. So you're never stumbling across these like little bite-sized stories. They're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go into the Akame network. I'm gonna click this mission." And she's like, "Oh, like Joru, because that's the name he's taken for to be undercover." He's like, "I've got a mission for you." Like they they kind of like this the sub stories were always great to stumble upon because you never knew what street was going to bring something. So like that's kind of gone. The Kami network is there to do all these side missions, which give you points, and then points mixed with cash is how you upgrade your abilities. So it's a two-pronged process because you can go to the Coliseum and you can make millions of yen in no freaking time whatsoever. Like in 45 seconds, you can make 700,000. Like that's how quick you can essentially make money. But if you don't have the Akami points, that money means absolutely nothing. So you kind of have to engage with both parts of the world, and it's just filler. And like they took the combat system down to Secret Agent and Yakuza, so you have these two styles that kind of work. So the combat is incredibly simplistic. I don't think Sotenburi like feels as unique to this game. It feels similar. Like it's got some neat cameos. There's one cameo in particular that I won't reveal that is a character that has kind of been a standout in their particular series, and
Okay.
it's a it's a really neat cameo because you get to learn more about that kind of stuff. Um, but again, like there's some good moments in this game, but 99% of them are all in that final chapter,
That's really
and
interesting. That's really,
like
really
a
interesting.
third of that final chapter is like, is it you've beaten like a dragon?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going through it now. I'm at the part where like I think they're all strung up in that
Okay, yeah. I know where
um
you are.
that area after being threatened by that one guy in the white suit. Like that's where I left off of. But
Nice.
it's like that whole scene in like the boardroom where they're like breaking down the Yakuza and stuff like that in Like a Dragon. That scene is in this, but from Kairu's perspective. It's
Okay.
also only in Japanese. But
Yeah.
and I will say, like, the spoil one of the games later, the English voice that they have for Kiryu in Like a Dragon is a billion times better than the voice they have
You know who's
in
doing the
Infinite Wealth.
voice in this one, don't you?
In Infinite Wealth, it's what, Yang Yi,
And in this one.
I think is his.
And in Gaiden.
Yeah, but the English voice for Gaiden is not available at launch.
Oh, is it not? Okay.
No, I think that was coming later. English voices. Uh,
Because I was going to say,
like a dragon.
because he replaced the, because they hadn't actually, before Like a Dragon, they hadn't done an English voice
Yeah, it's
for
not at
Kiryu,
release.
right?
It won't. Yeah, so the game debuted on November 9th, but won't initially feature an English dub.
Ah, interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, because like I'm gonna play Infinite Wealth in English because I just want to listen to everybody talk.
I actually, so
Voice.
I played Like a Dragon in English. I don't know if, I assume you are, Jeff, as well.
Yeah,
But I
yeah, I
actually
played it in English. Yeah,
I really really liked the English voice cast for it. I thought they did a great job. But what I like about the what I like about these games and the Judgment games as well, they're obviously a spin-off of this series,
yeah,
is like they will actually use a lot of the same English voice actors, but they use them in different parts. So like
Yeah.
the guy who does the main character in Judgment is the voice actor for Namba in Like a Dragon. And it's
Mm.
like, that's cool. It's like a nice
Yeah.
little thing there. But I do have to ask, as you brought it up, Jeff, what do you
Yeah.
think of Like a Dragon so far?
Like the man who erased his name.
No, no, no. Like the like Yakuza 7, Like a Dragon.
Okay, well. Oh, like a dragon. Yeah, like it's good. Like the turn-based stuff I think is fine. I think it still brings out that kind of brawler appeal to it. I do like how like Kiryu in Infinite Wealth has like a special attack that just lets you run around and fight real time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like that's kind of
That's
neat.
cool because
Um,
I saw that on a demo because obviously it's been demoed at a few places now, and I like that.
well, the demo is available in Gaiden.
Yeah, and I like that they're allowing him to sort of break the system of the game, right? Which is
Yeah,
really cool.
but yeah, like I'm gonna eventually beat it before Infinite Wealth comes out, provided I don't hit that one grinding wall that everybody was like having an
There is a
issue with.
grinding wall,
That
but
might,
there's an easy way round it, which, to be fair, still is a little bit of a grind, but it took me like 2 hours, as opposed to like some people it took them 10 hours, kind of thing. So it's there is a way round the
no,
grinding wall in the game, but there's definitely a point in the game where, depending on how much side content you've engaged with throughout your playthrough, it will affect how
yeah,
much grinding you need to do, for sure.
yeah.
You've
But no,
obviously
it's pretty good.
you have played other things though, Jeff, and I see one on the
Yeah,
list that I'd really like to hear about because I haven't
sure.
yet played it, and that is Mario Wonder, which I know you've been playing.
Yeah. Yeah, like I still have like a few levels that I haven't discovered yet because there's a lot of like secret levels that you discover along the way, plus like the special world. But when I went into the special world, the first level was like I think a 5-star rated one, and I just couldn't grasp my I couldn't grasp what it wanted from me. So I went back to the real worlds and stuff in the game. It is interesting. Like it's one of those games where like you can definitely tell because during development they took a lot of ideas from pretty much everybody on staff. Like they had hundreds of ideas, and it seems that they kind of worked those all in because every single level that you take part in this game feels unique, like it has some unique idea. Like it'll borrow sometimes the same mechanics from other levels, just that's just how the moves work essentially. But there's so many levels from like singing levels and music levels and like all sorts of things where like platforms shuffle and change dramatically. And you also have like the wonder seeds, which then change the levels and become these like acid trips essentially as you're going through stuff and like stretching Mario and all sorts of things. And it's really neat. And it's one of those games where it's like creativity is the focal point of what this game is. Like there is so much variety, and then you have the badge system, which makes everything like change different as well. Because some badges you can use your hat to float, some allow you to jump higher, some allow you to like, collect coins more from like stomping goombas or whatever. Like those badges change the levels themselves, but it feels really good. And then you've got multiplayer, and there's two types of multiplayer. There's the local multiplayer, which is fine, the online multiplayer where you essentially have like other players as ghosts. Though that is it's a strand game now, basically. Like a lot of people have said, like you're moving around and then all of a sudden you'll see a ghost of something and then you'll die and then you'll float to the ghost and then he'll resurrect you and then you can just keep going. Or like you'll see a ghost like go up in a left corner and then start hopping up, and you're like, wait, how is he getting out there? And you'll jump. Oh, there was an invisible block there, and then you go up there and you collect your star coin or whatever, and then you move on. So like you get to see these people like playing alongside you, and it's very interesting. Like it's one of those games again where like every 5 minutes you feel like you're doing something new. It
That's
never
really
feels
good to hear.
stale. Uh, it's like the animation's really nice. Honestly, if you were to tell me that this was still the original voice actor, I believe you.
Oh,
You
wow,
don't
okay.
notice you don't notice that it's different at all. But then again, like, it's very minimal the amount of voice that's in this game because
Yeah,
you have the like wowie zowie and then like the wahoos and all that kind of stuff. Like you have all those standard things. But again, like you don't hear Mario enough. Like he's not talking really other than the wowie zowie. But you don't feel that it's any different. Like it still feels like it's the same Mario we've known since Mario 64.
that makes sense. That makes sense to me. So I know you have a lot, so we will save a couple of these for for another episode. But there are there are three more games I want to talk about, and then I'm gonna kind of go into a final small topic for us. But Blasphemous 2, you've been playing, and also The Last
Yeah.
Faith. I believe you've put out The Last Faith review now, which you've done. We got provided a code for that, so thank you for that. Um, but I want to hear, because obviously these two games are quite similar in from what I've
Yeah.
seen.
And I also got a code for Blasphemous 2 as well, too. So I got a code for both of them.
Nice.
Um, yeah, like honestly, if if you were only ever to buy one of these, I would say Blasphemous 2. Um, like I think it's just the better game. But that's not to put down Last Faith. Last Faith is excellent. Although it's Last Faith, I would suggest not playing it on Steam Deck because the screen ratio doesn't work with the Steam Deck that well, and it cuts off the doors on the left and right,
Yeah,
so you won't
it's
know
not
where you're
yet,
going half the
from
time.
my understanding, it's not yet properly optimized for Steam Deck,
Yeah.
but it does run on
Well,
a
it doesn't
machine.
have. Yeah, it doesn't have like any visual or any visual settings whatsoever, even on laptop. Like there's no changing the resolution or anything like that.
Oh wow,
It's
okay, that's
one
interesting.
resolution. That's all it is. So they're taking a look at other video options as well too. Because I got a email from the air company. Um, Last Faith, like it is kind of that like almost like Bloodborne style, like Metroidvania, where like it has that gothic kind of dead feel to it. And it's excellent. I think the attacking is a bit too slow though. I think there's like either an input delay or something, but it's still extremely good. Um, Blasphemous 2 though is like it feels incredibly refined. It's also a very different game. Like it still has that Dark Souls kind of charm in regards to like its difficulty, where every time you pray and refill your health, the enemies recharge. But it doesn't use souls in the same way that say like Last Faith does, which it just carbon copy over Dark Souls.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
you're upgrading your stuff.
one thing I would like to add about Last Faith, because I've played a little bit of it, but also what I found quite impressive is, and I don't know how many people made Blasphemous 2, but Last Faith was made by 10 to 15 people, and I actually thought that that was really impressive, for kind of, you know, seemingly the scope of the game so far from what I've seen, and I like to see small teams doing cool and interesting things. And Last Faith, although it is taking stuff from games we know and games that many people love, it does seem to be combining them in an interesting way. Like when you say to somebody Bloodborne Castlevania, like that gets people excited because it's doing something people want to see. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
Um,
the Game Kitchen for Blasphemous says it has anywhere between 11 and 50 people. So
Interesting.
it depends on Depends on the
Interesting.
how many are contractors and stuff. Because if it says 11 to 50, you would assume that it's 11 core people and
Yeah,
then
you would assume that that's 11
contractors and
full
stuff.
time core people. Yeah.
But no, like Blasphemous does something a bit different where it's more built on the items that you're collecting
Okay.
because like you don't increase like stats. Like you're not putting stats or points into strength or
So,
vitality or anything like
can I
that.
ask a question then?
Like
Do you, when you die, do you lose these items?
no, you don't lose anything
Okay.
other than it shortens your MP bar. But if you collect your death back, it basically removes the rotting on the MP bar. But if you die repeatedly, it'll add more that you can't rebuild, and then you just go basically, you go to this guy who's sitting in a chair, and then you pay him, and then he removes the rot.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
so all of the souls that you're collecting, um, they don't go away. Like you use those to buy items, you use those to like buy key things that you can slot into other things. You also get these special currency tokens that you can use to like increase things. But like to increase like the amount of vitality you have, you have to find chalices and then you take them to some person that extends your health bar. And then you find like receptacles and that increases how many potions you
I
have.
like that.
And then
I
if
like that.
you find these like silver shards or whatever, I can't remember what it is, that will increase the potency. Um, and then like your weapons use those same tokens to like upgrade those, but then there's also upgrades that you could buy for your weapons as you find them around the map. And then if you find the weapon again, it unlocks the second tier and then the third tier, and then that makes them more powerful. It builds up more combos and all sorts of stuff. And
Okay.
it's just
That actually
like
does sound really
the
interesting.
the world itself, like I will say, like I grasp Last Faith's story a bit more than Blasphemous because Blasphemous 2 is like you have to stop the birth of this miracle, and the words and the lore around it is a lot of this like floaty scripture, biblical kind of stuff that is not engaging me so much. Like I like the presentation of the story a little better in Last Faith, where you have these really nice drawn artwork pieces and it that stuff I found more engaging, but, like, the gameplay wise, I feel like most of the deaths that I have in Blasphemous 2 feel more earned than the ones I have in Last Faith, because Last Faith has that delay that kind of
Interesting.
I don't care for.
Interesting.
But, like, Last Faith still has some things that I find kind of awkward, like, there's some animation locking where, like,
Yeah.
if you're, like, slamming the button down, it almost wants to continue the repeated animations of the weapon swinging before you can,
And I
like, jump
could
or
be
move.
wrong. Maybe you can check this, Jeff. I haven't actually verified this, but I believe that Last Faith might be the developer's first game as well. So
Oh, could be.
so it would be quite interesting. Like based on what I've seen of the game so far, I'm actually quite interested to see because I agree with a lot of your sort of small issues with the game. Um, I would be interested to see number one if they improve any of those things through updates, and some of those things could be improved through updates, but also
I don't know if they would really fix the delay because, like, that's kind of
part of the way the
that
game
that
plays,
that
right?
would that would that would change entirely how that game plays. Like, it would change that game entirely, and I don't know if the fan base that likes it as it is
Yeah,
would really take to that.
I agree. So it does, but it makes me interested to see like they're gonna be a team that I'm watching in the future to see what they do, with another game and things like that because these are the kind of games that I really love to see do well and find success because like I was saying earlier, this is where the interesting stuff comes from, and sometimes it is we're just going to take these elements from AAA games that we like and we're going to combine them in a way that hasn't really been done before. And that's kind of what Last Faith is doing. Blasphemous sounds like it's doing something slightly different, which I really like, because it's nice to have two games that are somewhat similar but doing different things, and it sounds like they both have their own things that they do better than the other. Um, like you said about
Yeah,
how
like last
the way the story is
yeah, like
presented in Last Faith is different, and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, like Last Faith, like to me, like it feels like a greatest hits of the genre. Like it doesn't feel like it's doing anything original. Like I don't think there's an original component to Last Faith at all. It leans into its inspirations significantly. Whereas like Last Faith, or sorry, whereas Blasphemous 2 feels like it is doing something unique. Like it doesn't feel like it is just another like Dark Souls game, but in a different genre. Because like again, like it doesn't penalize you in the same ways. Like it just refills the enemies on the map and like how those types of things work.
Yeah,
So I think it uses less of those inspirations. But they're both great. They're both extremely good games. It's just if I had to pick one, it would be Blasphemous 2.
absolutely. What I would say is, when Jeff has reviews out for both these games, which he may have done already, I know he's got at least one out. Um,
Yeah, Last Faith is out, and Blasphemous it'll be a little bit because I think I got two or three main bosses left.
Nice, okay. So, but when Jeff has both these reviews out, I really would recommend checking them out because, like I said, they're somewhat similar games, and hopefully our reviews will help you to figure out which one's more for you. Um, you know, that's what reviews are for, right? um, I do want to now go in a different direction, and that is because I haven't actually been playing much outside of Alan Wake 2, which I'm not going to talk about yet because, as I said, the current plan is in about 3 days' time, we're going to record an Alan Wake 2 spoiler cast where we will go really heavily into the game, because that will be our only topic for that show. Um, so I want to kind of use my what have I been playing time to go into a final topic, which is this Xbox tax discussion that I mentioned earlier, where
Yeah.
if you've been on social media recently, you've seen this kind of discussion going around about, is there an Xbox tax? And what people mean by that is essentially, is there a bias against Xbox from gaming media and content creators that isn't quite the same as what the other platforms go through, right? So and the reason this conversation came around was because a lot of people, not a small chunk of people, quite a lot of people felt like maybe some of Xbox's games this year were a little bit overlooked for some of the bigger awards at the Game Awards. And I think that that's where the conversation sort of came from. And then it evolved into this thing of like, you know, is media bias, and do Xbox games get rated lower just because they're on Xbox, and all this kind of stuff. And I have to say, like, in the past, I've definitely felt like there is some sort of media bias towards Xbox, in the same way that I think that it would be impossible for anybody to say that there isn't some level of bias towards Nintendo as well, right? Like, we've all said it before. I think every single gamer has said before that there are Nintendo games that kind of review higher than you potentially expect them to review, and sometimes it feels like they're just because of the IP that they are, or because of the fact that they're a Nintendo game? I don't really know. And what I've come round to on this whole conversation, and I'd love to know what you think, Jeff, is that I don't really think there's a specific Xbox tax, but I think that there is almost like this bias against whoever isn't the leading company. And what I mean by that is, in media terms, these media companies are always going to focus on whoever is the leading company more because it gets engagement. And they will then be more negative about the other companies than they perhaps would. And I think part of what feeds into that is, like we saw with the PlayStation in the PS3 generation, right? Once you're behind and once you're not the top dog, it takes more work to come back. And it almost takes perfection time after time over a long period of time to actually come back and get on a level playing field again. It's almost like you have to work harder if you're behind. But that's the thing. I don't know if that's really a bias or whether it's just something that is ingrained in the human consciousness of, like, when we perceive something as lesser, it always is going to take more to prove to us that they're just as good. And I saw a comment earlier today, because obviously with all this speculation that Gears 6 might be revealed soon, I saw one comment on Twitter that actually amazed me, where a person said that they didn't play Gears 5 because it came out during a time where media and content creators were telling them that every single Xbox game was bad, and because they were hearing it from so many people, they just believed it and they never went to look for themselves. And that, I guess, shows the influence of people. But what I have to ask you, Jeff, is, do you think there's some sort of bias against Xbox, or do you think it's more of a whoever's in third place or whoever's not the leader just has to work harder to kind of prove their point?
Well, I think Xbox has changed a lot of their business model to be a little bit more of a different topic, especially with Game Pass and stuff like that. Like that's been kind of like the talking point for them. But I mean, like, yeah, like I've seen it, especially with like, say, like IGN, where they'll like talk about a game and then they'll like compare it to like PlayStation. Like the comparison will always be to PlayStation. Now, granted, that could be because like Xbox sometimes takes a little longer to get codes out, so that's why you're going to see a lot of games being reviewed on PlayStation because yeah, you can get games like was it Nick All Stars Brawl? I was able to get like 2 to 3 days earlier on PlayStation than I was on Xbox. So like there could be that as well too, which is why you see so many PlayStation reviews as opposed to Xbox reviews. But even you brought up the XCast for kind of funny, where because they're prominently a PlayStation and Nintendo podcast or Nintendo outlet. But at the exact same time, the only kind of funny person who's on that podcast was brand new, and that was Snowbike Mike. Everybody else that started it was Alana Pierce and Gary Widow, which are not kind of funny employees. And then when Alana Pierce left, they brought in Paris Lilly, who's not a kind of funny employee. So like they made a Xbox podcast, yes, but not out of core kind of funny people. So like you still have, Greg, who is definitely more PlayStation focused than anyone else. You have like,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
And also, that's the thing, is
other.
I don't think there's a bias. Well, look, I think that everybody has some level of built-in bias, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a preference. Greg, for example, he does play up to it, but we know that he doesn't really like PC gaming, right? We know that PC gaming is his least favorite. um, and we know that at the end of the day, Greg isn't against Xbox, but he's much more familiar with PlayStation, and that's where he likes to play his games. And so he is PlayStation leaning. and many people at Kind of Funny are. This we're just using Kind of Funny as an example, but I
Yeah,
agree with what you're saying of like, yeah, they're kind of a PlayStation and Nintendo leaning media outlet, which leads to probably this thing, probably. But but what I want to ask, because I don't know if you saw, but Dustin Legary got quite defensive about this Xbox tax thing, and
yeah,
he
yeah. I saw little bits and
initially
pieces. Of,
he initially was very much like, oh, I don't think it exists, and I think people are overreacting. And then I think it was Florian Mueller, who is he's the guy who was kind of covering the ABK deal. He's used to work for Blizzard, and then became like something to do with acquisitions and stuff. And he's very informed. And what he said is that at the end of, he basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but what he essentially said is there's no smoke without fire, and he has seen some circumstances where there is clearly a PlayStation leaning perspective on
well,
things.
yeah, there was a GameSpot article like back in 2017 where it's like Xbox will allow you to play your pirated movies. And then a year later, there was a PlayStation 4 update going, PlayStation 4 now allows you to play MKVs. Like,
Yeah,
it's the
so
same thing.
it's the
Like,
it's the positive and negative spin on the same news, right? And that's the problem.
yeah,
Is I think that that's what people are talking about when they talk about Xbox tax, is that
well, even,
like everything for Xbox from the majority of media outlets seems to be,
yeah,
we're going to spin this in a negative way because we know that
yeah.
negativity on Xbox sells. That's essentially why they're
And they
doing
do
it.
the, like IGN, as far as I know, I think it's them. They go like, here's the 5 games leaving Game Pass this week. And then another outlet will be like, here's the 17 games coming to Xbox Game Pass this month. And then at the bottom of the article, and like, oh, by the way, these 5 are leaving. Like they do that bullshit where it's like, these games are leaving Game Pass. It's like, yeah, but there's 17 other games being added.
But would you say? But that's what I mean. Would you say though? Is that just the business of running a website? As in, if Xbox were the leader, like they were for much of the 360 generation, would it just be the other way round again? Or is it because they're Xbox? As in, has it become this situation where it's fun to be negative about Xbox and it will always be that way now?
Oh yeah, like a lot of outlets, like they need to, you know, provide engagement, which is why you see IGN doing the in case you missed it, and they'll post the same news article like 19 times that day. IGN, we didn't miss it. We didn't miss it the first time. No. But yeah, like you'll get those stories and stuff. But yeah, there is definitely there is a lot of negative brought up on that kind of stuff. Whereas like I think it was even, but then there's like some of the good stuff as well too, because I think it was Spirit Tea. I'm not 100% too sure, where they were saying that like originally the game was supposed to come out last year, but then when they got the Game Pass deal, they're like, well, we can actually make this game
Yeah,
way
so they
better.
so they yeah, so the some I think it was Mike Rose basically confirmed that when they got the Game Pass deal, that enabled them to delay the game by an entire year, which ultimately resulted in them adding up to like 100 hours of content to the game. And it's like,
Yeah. So I mean, and like most outlets ran with that in very positive stories.
mhm,
But then that like later that day or whatever, they'll post some type of negative thing about Game
yeah,
Pass to like I don't know if it's like to balance it out or something. But yeah, like I think there is definitely some, but there is like definitely like negativity does drive a lot of that type of stuff because there was a lot of them that were for that during the APK deal because that was like what 17 months or something. So, I mean that was like a lot of their their business, and then they had like the leak and all that kind of stuff. So like negativity has been driving a lot of Xbox stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's been like that for years, like especially during the Xbox One era, because like, Xbox stumbled out of the gate, so it was easy clicks for them to kind of promote that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, of
But even
course.
then, when PlayStation has made some like bad moves and stuff like that, they haven't really been covering that as well. Like no one's bringing up
Yeah.
the idea that that one um, Korean action game, which was originally announced for Xbox, that now has a publishing deal with Sony
And is
that's not
exclusive
coming
now,
to
right? Yeah.
Xbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no one's talking about that, yet everyone's kind of like, "Oh, they took Starfield from
And I
us."
and I think that that's the issue is like I understand it from a media perspective being somewhat defensive of like because you don't want to be biased, right? Like that's not ultimately that's not what their job is. So I understand being a little bit defensive is like I saw Destin Legary brought up like how at IGN Xbox games actually tend to review very well most of the time. You know, Forza Horizon 5 got a 10, Halo Infinite got a 9, that kind of stuff. And it's like the thing is people aren't just talking about reviews. Like I think there are some cases where it could be argued of like would this game have reviewed differently if it was on a different platform? But I think that's true of every single platform, right? You know, one of the things I said previously was like, if Days Gone was an Xbox exclusive, I actually think it would have reviewed a lot higher than it did at the time. I think because it was a PlayStation exclusive, it led to this situation where it was being compared to these very, very exceptional PlayStation games at the time, and it just paled in comparison to those, which made it seem like a worse game than it was. I think. Um, but people aren't just talking about reviews, and I think that that's the thing that maybe some of these media people sort of miss slightly is like, you know, people are talking about the fact that, like you're saying, Jeff, it's when there is positive news about Xbox, it doesn't seem to get as much traction. Or what I've noticed a lot as well, and this isn't any specific site, but I've noticed that a lot of positive Xbox news doesn't get reported until like 3 or 4 days later. And then
Yeah.
by that time, it's kind of too late to have a nice moment and give them some nice news, right? Whereas when something positive happens for one of the other companies, it seems to be like, oh, this news is up within an hour because it's great, you know? And I get that it's all about clicks and prioritizing certain things. And I do think there is a certain element of, like, we saw the same thing with the PlayStation in the PS3 era, where everything was negative about the PlayStation until probably Last of Us, right? Like Last of Us really was the point where things for PlayStation started to change, and that was only because at that time they'd done something quite unique, right? They'd made a game that was quite unique. I think that Xbox have had a period of time now for 10 years where they've had a lot of negative news, and I think that they've had a few years of really positive stuff, but they're still, you know, a few years of really positive stuff doesn't make up for 10 years of not great stuff. Do you know what I mean? Um, and I think that if there's still this weird media situation in like 5 years' time, then we've got a bit of a problem. But ultimately, I think that it's just something that happens because media are going to report and focus on the things that get the most engagement. That is their job. Does that mean that there's no bias at all? No, I don't agree with that. I think that every single person in the world has some form of bias because ultimately, even a preference is a bias. It's just that it's a very light bias. it's when you get biased to the point that you can't see the forest from the trees, that's when it becomes an issue. I think that most media people are not like that. Are there people that maybe when it like, and I'm not going to name anyone specific because I don't know, right? Are there people that potentially rate Zelda games a little bit higher than they would if they weren't called Zelda? I believe so. I don't know if Jeff thinks that's true, but I do believe there's something about an IP and being a known IP almost gives you a little bit more leverage with what you're able to do and what people find acceptable and not acceptable, right? It's is there sometimes unfair comparisons with games? Like one of the points I saw somebody make is like Spider-Man 2 bugs were being kind of paraded around like this really funny stuff, even like on IGN
Oh,
and GameSpot. They were being paraded around like really funny, these are cool, let's keep them in. And yet when Starfield had some bugs, what was the tone of that conversation? You know? And it's
well, yeah, like there's a bug with Venom right now that can break your PS5, and IGN's like, ha ha ha, look at this.
precisely. And it's just like, and that's what I mean. I think all people are really asking for is a consistent tone when you're reporting news, right? Like if it's positive news, let it be positive
Yeah.
regardless of what the platform is. That's all people are
Mm.
really asking for. And if it's negative news, it's negative regardless of what the platform is. I I I think that's all people really want. But ultimately, these sites are going to go with what sells, right? And over the last sort of 10 years, what seems to sell and get engagement is really positive stuff about PlayStation, really negative stuff about Xbox, and then anything about Nintendo sort of regardless. It's yeah, it's interesting, but I I had to bring it up because I felt like it's a bit disingenuous of people to call it an Xbox tax because I don't think it's an Xbox specific problem. I think it's just the situation that Xbox have found themselves in up until probably this generation really means that they're in the situation where being negative about them is the thing that sells, right? Because it became this almost like running joke in the Xbox One generation. And I think that they haven't quite moved away from that yet. Hopefully, into 2024 and beyond, they will, right? Because they are starting to deliver on all these things we had hoped for from them. But I think ultimately, you're never going to get away from people having a somewhat bias. You know, someone I like, Colin Moriarty, often talks about how everyone in games media has a certain political bias. And that's a different thing, but it kind of proves my point that people have biases. They just do. It is inherent nature of human beings. I don't think we're ever going to escape that. I think that because PlayStation is the most popular console out of PlayStation and Xbox, I think that you're always going to find a situation where the majority of people at a media outlet prefer PlayStation, and that means that they will focus more positively on PlayStation than they would on Xbox, right? Kind of Funny was one of the examples we gave of that earlier, and Jeff actually put it in a way that I didn't even think about before. But like Jeff said, only one of those people on that Kind of Funny podcast is actually a Kind of Funny employee. um, and it's like, so they had to go and search for the right people to do that show because most people in their company are either more Nintendo or more PlayStation focused. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I just think it's the
Yeah, that's
reality
Steve.
of is the reality of the world, essentially. If we get to a situation again like the 360 generation, where Xbox is more popular than PlayStation, which isn't impossible, that could happen in the future. I guarantee you, like I would put money on it right now, that it will then be flipped and people will be more negative about PlayStation. Maybe it's just because in this age of social media, most people forget that generation, but when you look back, there was so much negativity about PlayStation during that generation. Like, the second that price came out for that console, until basically the end of the generation, people were making fun of that console. And that just happens. Like, let's get on with it. Let's just play games and have fun, and take games for what they are, without comparing all the time, because comparison is the thief of joy, right? Like, that's the everybody knows that saying. It's like, you don't need to compare all the time. Comparing is fun for a very critical focused conversation, but when you're just playing a game, just play a game and enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, move to something else. That's all you have to do. So, let's close out this episode now, I think, Jeff. Are there any reviews that you'd like to plug before we get away from here?
I'm trying to think the last thing I posted. I want to say it was yeah, so the last review that I put out was Gangs of Sherwood. Um, it's like an alternative history Robin Hood game. You can 4-player co-op. It's almost like a 4-player Devil May Cry, but less spectacle. Um, Still, it's actually pretty decent. It's a very kind of Xbox 360 era style game. Like if this was a game that was made during that era and then someone found the disc and said, "Hey, let's publish it today," it feels like that. Last Faith review is out as well too. I put out a review also for Dredge and its DLC called A Pale Reach. Dredge is absolutely fantastic. It's a very chill and yet moody and supernatural sort of fishing game. I definitely do suggest checking it out. Very, very cool. But those are the last 3
Nice.
reviews,
Have you
and
got any that are coming up over the next few days that people should be looking out for?
yeah, like I'm currently writing a review for Like a Dragon Gaiden. So that should be out this week. Um, and then I'm going to try and together a review for Mario Wonder as well. And
Fantastic.
then Blasphemous 2 once I beat it.
Fantastic. So, let's end with a bit of trivia, shall we? As we did last week. Uh, do you remember what the trivia question was? Because none of you answered it. I asked what was the first 10 we gave on the website. And Jeff, I'm now going to make it your job to reveal the answer of that question.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Ruiner.
It was. It was.
Game is so good.
um.
So good.
So I'll now go with a bit of an easier question this week. Again, site related. Sometimes these will be website related. Sometimes they'll be just general video game trivia. But site related, and Jeff will know this one, or he should do. What was the first
Probably.
video game that I reviewed for the website? That's one for you to go and find. It's a little bit more recent, so you should be able to find it easier. And yeah, if you find that, put it down in the comments below. Let us know on social media. You can follow us. Our ats are there. We use mainly Twitter. We're not going to call it X. We just refuse to do so. It's Twitter forever to us. And yeah, please subscribe, like, share this episode with all your friends. Leave feedback in the comments. Check out the website because Jeff is always doing reviews over there. My Alan Wake 2 review will be coming at some point. Obviously, we are doing a spoiler cast, so there's that as well. The likelihood is that my written review will actually come after the spoiler cast, just because I still haven't quite finished the game yet, and I need to finish it and then kind of gather my thoughts and write it. And I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do that by the time we record that episode, but certainly by the time you see that episode, my review should be out. Is what I'm planning for. And yeah, so check us out because we've always got stuff, and we're a good place for news as well. We report some news, and hopefully you like the site. Hopefully you like the podcast. Like I said, leave us any feedback, because we're always open to it. We're like an open book, aren't we, Jeff? In terms of feedback with this show and figuring things out. Obviously, next week, if I'm not mistaken, is the Game Awards as well, right, Jeff? So we should.
Yes.
So we should be recording an episode the day after the Game Awards. That is how it should pan out for us. Which means that you probably. I'll try and get that one out as quickly as possible. In terms of, making it available to you as quickly as possible after the Game Awards, so that you don't have to wait for like a week to see our reactions, because I feel like there's going to be some pretty big announcements at the Game Awards. I don't know about you, Jeff, but I'm certainly feeling that way.
It should be decent stuff.
It should be, and I'm looking forward to seeing the winners. I think we know that it's going to be one of two games for most awards, as our predictions went. But I'm looking forward to seeing if there is any surprises there. And I still find it really hilarious that Jeff Keighley decided to say that indie means different things to different people, and that makes it okay that Dave the Diver was nominated. Fair enough, Jeff. Whatever. But
it's like the people are like, oh, it was published by a company that has millions of dollars, and then they're comparing it to it's like if Sony made blah blah blah. I'm like, I think Sony and Nintendo have more money than Nacon.
Absolutely.
Nacon's not an infinite source of money.
So there you go. That's our 5th episode. We've come in at about 2.5 hours, so a bit shorter than the last one. We will, one of these days, do a 2-hour episode. Don't you worry. That will happen. But yes, over the next couple of weeks as well, we will have an update on kind of future episodes and stuff, because at some point over the holidays, we'll probably take a week or two break, I imagine, just because we'll both be busy celebrating and doing other things, and Jeff looking after his cat, which we haven't seen the cat today. I'm a bit disappointed, but
oh yeah, they were getting carried away by the door and then looking back at the podcast fondly. Stuff like that. They were over there meowing earlier.
Lovely. So we will see you next time, and it won't be that far away. Realistically, by the time you're watching this episode, your next episode's probably in like 4 days. So look forward to that. Like I said, we've got a guest on the next one. It's Luke from Eat Sleep Games, so go and check him out because he does playthroughs and lovely YouTube shorts that make me laugh every single time. And yeah, we'll see you for that, because Alan Wake 2, one of the best games this year without doubt, really. So let's look forward to that one, shall we? Goodbye.